Have you ever wondered why some men suddenly become silent, distant, almost invisible in your life? No calls, no texts, not even seeming like they care anymore. Or perhaps they embody a cold indifference that cuts deeper than any argument ever could. The answer isn't what you think it is. It's not disinterest. It's not that he's found someone else. And it's definitely not because you did something wrong. It lies in something more uncomfortable, more unsettling. Something that deconstructs everything we were taught about how men process emotions and their place in relationships. Because when a man chooses silence, he isn't rejecting you. He's protecting himself. He's entering a psychological space that most women don't understand, and that most men can't even explain. That kind of emotional withdrawal, that journey into male silence, doesn't come with explanations, apologies, or clarity. It comes with confusion, distance, and a kind of self-preservation most people still don't recognize. No, he's not emotionally unavailable by choice. He's overwhelmed. He's not playing games. He's drowning. He just got triggered by something deeper than the surface argument you think caused this. There's something profoundly misunderstood about a man who suddenly goes silent, because that shatters our logic of communication. It dismantles the myth of straightforward male behavior, and it reveals a brutal truth. Most women don't know how to navigate male silence, and most men are still learning to recognize what's happening in their own psychological landscape when they shut down. Carl Jung once said, "Everything we don't face in ourselves, we end up projecting onto others." And many of these silent men, they're not avoiding connection. They're reflecting the collective masculine shadow. They're processing emotions in ways society never taught them, retreating into spaces where they feel safe to feel without judgment. They don't scream their pain, they internalize it. They don't demand attention for their struggles, they disappear to process them alone. They're not trying to be mysterious. They're trying to make sense of what's never been explained to them. They're less interested in explaining their feelings, and more in understanding them, in finding their own emotional truth. And that makes women uncomfortable, because while the world teaches us that silence equals rejection, male silence often means the complete opposite. It means you matter so much that he's terrified of messing it up. Men operate on a different emotional level, a level where vulnerability feels dangerous, where opening up means potential destruction. And maybe that's why his silence sparks so much anxiety, so much overanalysis, so many attempts to chase and fix what seems broken. But what many still don't understand is that behind his apparent absence is a man who's trying to figure out how to show up authentically without losing himself in the process. He doesn't want to hurt you, but he also doesn't want to say the wrong thing. He's not trying to punish you, he's trying to understand what's happening inside his own mind. Maybe you don't get it right now. Maybe you think it's manipulation, emotional immaturity, or just plain cruelty. But deep down, way deep down, there's a question inside you, a quiet one, that pulses even when you try to ignore it? What if his silence isn't about you at all? What if it's about him trying to become the man he thinks you deserve? The silence that surrounds a man who's pulled away is not emptiness. It's a battlefield, a space where he's fighting demons you can't see, processing emotions he was never taught how to handle. Carl Jung also said, "Everything we don't integrate becomes our shadow." And maybe that's why so many men retreat into silence when emotions get too intense. They're trying to integrate feelings they've been taught to suppress their entire lives. While women are often taught to process emotions through communication, men are conditioned to process them through isolation. And there, in the vastness of his own mind, he's facing the fears he's avoided for years. Fear of not being good enough, fear of disappointing you, fear of losing himself in love. His decision to go silent didn't come from a place of not caring. It came from caring too much. He didn't stop loving you. He just stopped trusting himself to love you in the way he thinks you deserve. This man knows emotional chaos. He's felt overwhelmed by feelings he can't name, experienced anxiety that feels like drowning, faced the terror of vulnerability, and at some point his nervous system simply says enough and shuts down to protect him. She doesn't need to be saved from his silence. She needs to understand it. And that takes more than patience or understanding. It takes recognizing that male emotional processing often looks like withdrawal, not engagement. This creates two responses in women: panic and pursuit. Panic from those who interpret silence as abandonment, and pursuit from those who think they can love him back to communication. He doesn't want to be chased out of his silence. He wants to be trusted to find his way back. Until then, he remains distant, not by choice, but out of loyalty to his own emotional survival. This man isn't hiding from you. He's hiding from his own vulnerability. There's a massive difference between rejection and self-protection. But the world doesn't easily accept a man's need for emotional space. A world that still believes men should always be strong, always have answers, always be emotionally available. Carl Jung once said that where there is no consciousness of the shadow, there is emotional projection. And this man's silence often triggers the shadow in women, the fear of abandonment, the need to control, the desperate urge to fix what isn't actually broken. When he goes silent, he's not saying, "I don't want you." He's saying, "I don't trust myself right now." He's not withdrawing his love, he's withdrawing his chaos so it doesn't contaminate what you have together. The discomfort his silence causes isn't in what he's not saying, it's in what it represents. His silence is a mirror, reflecting our own fears about love, about security, about whether we're worthy of being fought for. Men who need emotional space feel judged. Women who fear abandonment feel rejected. But neither is actually true. He's not rejecting, he's recalibrating. And she's not being abandoned, she's being asked to trust a process she doesn't understand. But this man isn't punishing anyone, he's just surviving. And the authenticity of someone who needs space to process is, by itself, a brutal mirror to those who need constant reassurance to feel secure. This man isn't trying to control you with his silence. He doesn't need to create drama to get attention. He needs quiet to find his emotional center. And for that, he endures the misunderstanding of a society that wants men to be emotionally available on demand. He wants depth while the world expects him to be simple. He needs processing time while everyone else demands immediate responses. He craves understanding while people are busy creating stories about his silence. And when he doesn't respond immediately, it's not a rejection, it's self-regulation. When he takes time to think, it's not avoidance, it's emotional intelligence. When he chooses silence over reactive words, it's not coldness, it's wisdom.
Perhaps what unsettles women most about male silence isn't the quiet itself. It's not knowing how to respond to it. Carl Jung taught that those who look outward dream, but those who look inward awaken. And his silence is often his way of looking inward. It wasn't easy for him to learn this. It was a process of understanding that his emotions don't have to be managed by someone else, that his processing doesn't have to happen on anyone else's timeline. So, how do you reverse the dynamic? How do you respond to male silence in a way that actually works? First, you don't chase it. Chasing a man's silence is like trying to catch smoke. The harder you grab, the more it slips away. His silence isn't a puzzle for you to solve. It's a process for him to complete. Second, you don't take it personally. His silence isn't about your worth. It's about his overwhelm. The moment you make his emotional processing about you, you become part of the problem he's trying to solve. Third, you create space without creating distance. There's a difference between giving him room to breathe and withdrawing your presence entirely. You can be available without being demanding, present without being intrusive. Fourth, you focus on your own emotional regulation. His silence triggers your anxiety, but your anxiety triggers his need for more silence. It's a cycle that can only be broken when someone, preferably you, chooses emotional maturity over emotional reactivity. The woman who knows how to handle male silence doesn't panic, she trusts. She doesn't pursue, she allows. She doesn't demand explanations, she offers understanding. This isn't about becoming a doormat or accepting disrespectful behavior. This is about recognizing the difference between a man who's pulling away because he doesn't care and a man who's pulling away because he cares too much. When you stop chasing his silence and start trusting his process, something magical happens. The pressure he feels to explain himself diminishes. The fear that his emotions will overwhelm you starts to fade. A man's silence is often a test, not of your patience, but of your security. Can you love him without needing constant reassurance? Can you trust him without needing constant communication? Can you believe in his feelings without needing constant proof? The woman who passes this test doesn't win a prize. She wins his respect. Because she proved that she can handle his full emotional spectrum, not just the easy parts. Carl Jung spoke of the integration of opposites. In relationships, this means accepting that love isn't always verbal, that care isn't always expressed through words, that presence isn't always physical. Sometimes love is silence, sometimes care. But here's what most women miss. His silence isn't the problem. Your reaction to his silence is what creates the real distance. When you panic, you teach him that his emotions are dangerous. When you pursue, you teach him that his space isn't respected. When you demand explanations, you teach him that his processing isn't trusted. A man learns to communicate not by being forced to talk, but by feeling safe to be silent when he needs to be. Paradoxical? Yes. True? Absolutely. The woman who creates this safety doesn't do it by being weak or submissive. She does it by being strong enough to trust, secure enough to allow, and wise enough to know that sometimes the best way to get closer to someone is to give them room to breathe.
What you're witnessing when a man goes silent is actually his attempt at emotional regulation. In psychology, we call this stonewalling, but that term makes it sound intentionally harmful when it's often just self-protective. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks through symptoms. A man's silence is often his unconscious trying to tell you something. I need time to process. I feel overwhelmed. I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. I care too much to risk hurting you with my unprocessed emotions. The feminine tends to process emotions through expression, talking, crying, sharing. The masculine tends to process emotions through containment, thinking, analyzing, solving. Neither is wrong, they're just different. When these two different processing styles meet, it can create a perfect storm. She needs to talk through her feelings to feel better. He needs space from talking to feel better. She interprets his need for space as rejection. He interprets her need to talk as pressure. This is where most relationships break down. She keeps pushing for communication, which makes him retreat further. He keeps retreating, which makes her push harder. It's a dance of misunderstanding that can destroy even the deepest love. But when a woman understands that his silence isn't abandonment, it's actually his way of protecting the relationship, everything changes. When she stops trying to pull him out of his silence and starts trusting him to emerge when he's ready, the dynamic shifts completely. Here's the secret. A man falls deeper in love with a woman who can handle his emotional complexity without trying to fix it. He doesn't want to be your project. He wants to be your partner. He doesn't need you to solve his silence. He needs you to trust his process. The woman who can sit with uncertainty, who can love without controlling, who can trust without needing proof. This woman becomes irresistible to a man who's been judged for his emotional needs his entire life.
So what does this look like practically? How do you actually reverse the dynamic of male silence? First, when he goes quiet, resist the urge to fill the silence with words. Silence is not a vacuum that needs to be filled. It's a space that needs to be honored. Your comfort with his silence teaches him that his emotions are safe with you. Second, express your needs without making them about his silence. Instead of, "Why aren't you talking to me?" try, "I'd love to connect with you when you're ready." Instead of, "Are you okay?" try, "I'm here if you need anything." The difference is subtle but powerful. Third, use his silence as an opportunity to focus on yourself. Instead of obsessing over what he's thinking, ask yourself what you're feeling. Instead of trying to decode his behavior, decode your own reactions. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being self-aware. Fourth, when he does emerge from his silence, don't punish him for it. Don't say, "Finally!" or "I was wondering when you'd come back." Welcome him back without making him feel guilty for needing the space. Fifth, learn to distinguish between healthy silence and unhealthy withdrawal. Healthy silence is temporary, respectful, and followed by reconnection. Unhealthy withdrawal is indefinite, punitive, and designed to hurt you. A man who loves you will eventually come back from his silence ready to connect. A man who's using silence as a weapon will stay withdrawn until you chase him or give him what he wants. The woman who knows the difference protects herself from manipulation while supporting healthy emotional processing. She doesn't enable unhealthy behavior, but she doesn't pathologize normal male emotional patterns either. Remember, you're not trying to eliminate his need for silence. You're trying to create a relationship where his silence doesn't threaten your security. When you feel secure in his love, even when he's quiet, you've mastered one of the most important skills in loving a man. The awakened feminine doesn't fear masculine silence. She honors it. She understands that just as she needs to be heard,
He needs to be trusted. Just as she needs emotional expression, he needs emotional space. This isn't about sacrificing your needs. It's about understanding that your need for communication and his need for silence can coexist. You can feel loved even when he's not talking. He can feel trusted even when you need reassurance. Carl Jung wrote about the integration of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within each person. In relationships, this integration happens when both partners can honor their different emotional styles without trying to change.
This is the mature love that Jung spoke of, not the love that seeks to possess or control, but the love that seeks to understand and honor. It's not easy love, it's conscious love. It requires emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and the courage to love someone exactly as they are. When you can love a man's silence as much as his words, his withdrawal as much as his presence, his process as much as his conclusions, you've learned to love the totality of who he is. And that kind of love is so rare, so precious, that it transforms both of you. The woman who can do this doesn't lose herself in his silence. She finds herself in her own strength. She doesn't need his words to feel secure. She's secure in her own worth. She doesn't need his constant presence to feel loved. She knows love exists even in the spaces between words. That is the journey of conscious love, learning to honor different emotional styles while maintaining your own center. The world fears this kind of mature love because it requires emotional intelligence, self-regulation, and the courage to love without controlling. It challenges the myth that love means constant communication, that silence means abandonment, that men and women process emotions the same way. When you understand male silence, really understand it, you stop taking it personally and start taking it seriously. You stop trying to fix it and start trusting it. You stop fearing it and start honoring it. And when that happens, something beautiful occurs. His silence becomes a gift rather than a threat. His processing becomes sacred rather than scary. His emotional needs become as valid as your own. The love that emerges from this understanding isn't desperate or demanding. It's secure and spacious. It doesn't seek to eliminate differences. It celebrates them. It doesn't try to control outcomes. It trusts the process. If this message resonated with you, if it helped you understand something you've been struggling with, then I invite you to share it. Like this video, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more insights into the psychology of love and relationships. Because understanding is the beginning of healing, and healing is the beginning of real love. And real love, the kind that honors both silence and speech, both space and connection, is what we're all truly seeking. Don't let his silence scare you. Let it teach you. And in learning to love his silence, you might just discover the most profound love of all.